Okay, so what is anxiety? It's something that is a normal part of life in general. We can all feel anxious in certain situations. So, if you're doing an exam, going for a job interview, and a certain amount of anxiety is good. It's a good thing. It sharpens the senses and increases concentration. So that sort of short-term anxiety can be very useful. Um, but it can trigger, if it goes on a little bit or the situation becomes a bit more stressful, it can trigger what's known as the fight, flight, freeze response, which is part of our threat assessment mechanism. It's a physical system we have for assessing if something is a threat to our life, and then to do something about it. Principally, the choices of doing something about it are fight it, fly away, run away, or freeze, which is stand very still in the hope not to be noticed by the thing that's a danger. What does it do? It produces adrenaline, which increases our heartbeat, which is increasing the oxygen supply to our muscles, which gives us more energy. Um, After that adrenaline wears off, other hormones are released that may produce shakiness. Other things it does is it slows down our digestive system, so we may feel queasy or sick. So we go from that very tense muscles with lots of energy in them to very relaxed and shapely muscles. But those changes are designed to make you ready to deal with the dangerous situation, to fight it, run away from it, or stand very still. And whilst it's useful in protecting against physical dangers to our lives, a car's coming at us and you don't need to think about that, you need to do something about it or you get run over, so generally you're going to run away and get out of the way. But it's not so useful in most of our social interactions where this can be triggered and become difficult for us. So coming back to that exam situation, it's not very helpful if in the exam your fight-flight mechanism is triggered to the point where you're so anxious that you feel the need to run away from the exam. You're going to fail. Well, maybe you need to punch the invigilator because you see them as a threat. It's not helpful in those situations. If we have a lot of situations in which that is triggered, that response is triggered, it can become quite severe, the anxiety. So if our stress or anxiety stays at high levels, we can become extremely agitated, feeling like we're going to lose control. And in severe situations, feel like we're going mad. We have these really odd reactions all the time, and because our thinking is affected by this physical reaction or more of that. In some people, this constant anxiety may lead to the development of what's known as panic attacks. So what is a panic attack? Panic attack is simply an exaggeration of this fight, flight, freeze response. So it's a rapid build-up of overwhelming sensations. So you get the pounding heartbeat, feeling faint. Remember I said about the the changes in your digestive system that produces nausea. Pounding heartbeat is from the adrenaline in your system. You can get chest pains because of that. Because the adrenaline produces a higher breathing rate, that can produce really odd physical sensations such as pins and needles. Some people get them down one side and they think they're going to have a heart attack because of that. And pins and needles down. It's just because you've got too much oxygen in your system. Your thinking becomes distorted, so you may feel like you're going mad. And in extreme situations feel like you're going to die. So it's quite terrifying for people involved. It genuinely is quite a terrifying experience. They can come on quite quickly, panic attacks, and they usually last 5 or 10 minutes. For some people, they usually last 5 to 20 minutes. For some people, they can go on longer, and some people report them lasting for up to an hour. But anyway, after the initial panic attack, you may well still feel a very heightened sense of anxiety for some time afterwards. Now, you may have just a couple of panic attacks, one off, and that's it. You never have any more. Or you may have a lot of panic attacks. Some people have them for a long time if they go untreated. They can come without warning for some people because there's an unconscious trigger going on. So something you're unaware of has triggered a response in you. And they can also come at night time, and they can be particularly scary at night time. As we wake up, if you imagine, you're disorientated from coming out of a deep sleep. And if you come out of that in a state of panic, it's very scary and very bewildering. So they're quite serious and quite difficult things, and sort of have a genuine empathy for people experiencing them. So why do some people seem to experience anxiety more than others? And some people do. They seem to experience it. There's a number of possible explanations, and generally there's more than one thing going on for people. So past experiences, for example. Something distressing may have happened to you in the past, a traumatic event. You may have witnessed something traumatic. You may have been in the armed services, you may have had traumatic experiences as a child, you may have witnessed violence as a child between your parents, for example. And situations that you're in now can stir up some of those feelings and trigger you, and trigger those types of responses. Feeling anxious can be something you learnt early on as a child. If your family tended to see the world as a threatening or frightening place, you may well carry that view of the world with you, and you may not be aware of that, but it's just there. It's possible also that it's an inherited tendency, that it's genetic, and it's been passed on through the lines for some sort of survival reason within the species. And then also some types of medication that you get can produce or mimic, their side effects can produce or mimic anxiety symptoms. And lifestyle, finally, lifestyle things. If you drink too much coffee, it can produce anxiety. Same with drugs, same with alcohol. Use those things too much, you'll produce anxiety. A lot of people may use marijuana to try and relax. Actually, it's going to produce more anxiety, not relaxation, if you overuse it. Same with alcohol. And finally, this fear of losing control. It's well known that people who have a sense of having more control over their immediate life circumstances reduce their anxiety levels. People who feel like they have no power or control, their anxiety levels can go up. So people in sort of lower socioeconomic status who have financial insecurity, can't pay the rent, etc., that will produce, those types of situations, of course, will produce increased anxiety. But there's stuff you can do, even if you can't change your circumstances, you can change your response to those circumstances. If you know that it's triggering a panic response, you can you can reframe that experience. So what are the effects of anxiety? Well, they can have effects both on your body and also psychologically on how you think and how you feel. So the physical short-term effects are increased tension in your muscles. You're tense because of the adrenaline, the fight, flight, tension. Your rapid breathing may produce a sort of lightheaded feeling, make you feel shaky, as I've said before, and the pins and needles. Your rising blood pressure from the adrenaline increasing your heartbeat makes you more aware of your pounding heart. And changes in your blood supply to your digestive system can leave you feeling nauseous and sick, as I said. And also it changes your bowel system, so you may need to go to the toilet very urgently. The long-term physical effects are more serious, much more serious. The constant anxiety produces another chemical called cortisol, which has the impact of reducing your immune system, and that means you're more prone to infection. That's not a good thing. Your increased blood pressure causes pressure on your heart, your kidneys, your liver. It can increase the chances of you having a stroke. These are very serious possible consequences. Obviously, digestive problems, with that changes in your digestive system all the time. And also depression. It will produce long-term anxiety, will produce depression as well. Cortisol is linked to depression. The psychological effects, you're obviously more fearful, on edge, more irritable, unable to relax, and unable to concentrate, to read, to stay in a conversation with somebody. You may feel overly dependent on seeking assurance from people, become weepy and clingy on people. You can catastrophize. One can catastrophize. You're sort of always thinking that the worst thing is going to happen. So, for example, maybe a friend is late to see you for coffee or for a meal, and you start to think, oh, I wonder if they were killed in a car crash. I wonder if something dreadful has happened to them. And this is all a product of the psychological impact of anxiety. You're starting to create a narrative to try and explain why you feel so anxious. So to cope with these sensations and fears, you may well start to self-medicate, to smoke more, to use marijuana and street drugs, to drink more, etc. You may start to change your habits to try and avoid situations that produce anxiety and fear in you. So you shut down your social networks, you become socially anxious because you're anxious about meeting people, or you're worried about how you appear, and you're worried about having a panic attack when you're in public, all that sort of stuff. Therefore, you start dealing with what's worrying you. You disable your capacity to deal with those worrying situations. And for some people, it takes over their lives. They're having severe and constant panic attacks. They have a free-floating sense of anxiety all the time. The good news is this can be dealt with. We know how to deal with anxiety. A combination, initially of talking therapy will help you to change your thinking habits. I would work with you reframing your thinking, so you're not catastrophizing, for example. You're getting a more rational explanation of what's going on. You look at the evidence for and against your fears. I would work with you to change your behaviour so that you learn how to relax. That you would learn meditation with me, and mindfulness meditation is known to work. And these lifestyle changes, along with that, the sort of thinking changes, the cognitive changes, will help you manage the symptoms. And then if there are any underlying issues, in that you grew up like this, or you had trauma, I would help you process that trauma and those experiences and change them as well. So that's what you get from talking therapy. There's also medication. There's anti-anxiety medication, which is very helpful these days, and I would encourage you, if you have severe anxiety, to look at that with your GP. I would always encourage you to go and see your GP about these issues. I hope that ends on a very hopeful note. I want to make this point again. Anxiety can be managed, and we can deal with, if there are underlying issues, they can be dealt with relatively painlessly. So it doesn't take a long time. The management techniques for anxiety can be learnt within 6 to 12 sessions, and then within 2 years, even the most severe trauma will be dealt with. That may sound like a long time, but it's not. If you spend 10 years or 15 or 20 living with these very debilitating symptoms, 2 years is not a long time to sort them out. So please feel free to contact me if you wish. I'll give you a copy of this script, and if you want an assessment, I can help with that, or go and see your GP and get referred by your GP to see somebody. Don't ignore it at all, just don't ignore it. So my website is noelmcdermott.net. My phone number is 07506 319 745, and my email is info@noelmcdermott.net. Thanks for dropping by. Goodbye.